In this video, I'm going to make a lot of assumptions and blanket statements, and the reason is it's based off of my personal experience and the experience of most of the people I've ever talked to, and what I want to talk about is building a life you don't need to escape from. Have you ever heard the term your golden years? Later in life, after you're done with your working years, finally you can kick back with your pina colada on the beach and life is awesome. And people always talk about they can't wait till retirement. They can't wait till they're able to work less and enjoy life more. And I think we're backwards on that. I think we think that way based off of an assumption that we're going to live guaranteed 80 to 100 years. And as we all know, it's not true. Everything could be done and gone tomorrow, next week, next month, in 2 years. It doesn't matter. Your age doesn't matter. Nature does not discriminate. You could be gone tomorrow. But we all assume that we're going to live a very long life. And eventually all this work, all these goals that we're trying to achieve, and all these jobs that we work that we don't really like, that we're just sacrificing, and we're sacrificing everything. We're sacrificing time with family, time with friends, and on the things that are really important for our mental health and our well-being. We're sacrificing those things for a future date that will come and we will finally be happy. And my argument is, I think we can make a life that maybe isn't the definition in your head of bliss and pure joy 24 hours a day. And by the way, happiness isn't, and then everybody's like, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. Happiness is not, to me, in my opinion, I'm assuming happiness is not a worthwhile pursuit because it's fleeting, meaning once you get to happiness, it's not a perpetual state. It is a temporary high. Happiness is dopamine. That's like a chemical in our brain that just injects us with this happy, positive feeling, and then it goes away. It's the hedonic treadmill, and that's essentially meaning we have a goal, and the whole way to the goal, it's awesome. We're excited. We're going to hit it. We hit the goal. Now what? Now we're stuck, right? And that's why people in retirement age usually go pick up a part-time job or they go do something because they're bored. Because their whole life they thought retirement is the golden years and you're just going to be totally blissful for the rest of your life. And it's not true for the most part. And like I said, I'm assuming here, most people don't end up like that. It's not always a fairy tale for most people. There are a certain percentage of people that have done really well financially, that have made it, that get to live that those blissful golden years. But I would assume that 75% or more of people aren't like that. That doesn't happen to them, and that's not how life ends up working out. And we always delay our contentment and our joy for a later date in life that's going to be just nonstop bliss. And I think we can create a life that is a life where you reduce the amount of suffering. In my opinion, financial suffering is a lot of people's problems. Like they think they have to make a certain amount of money, or they have to have a certain type of house, certain size house, a certain type of car, certain type of clothes, all these materialistic financial things. Once they have all that in order, then they can be happy. And then life is really, this is what life is about. But I'm of the opinion that those things, yes, are important. You do have to make a living and support yourself and your family. But I think life can be very, very enjoyable right now, today, as it is. And we always need an escape. Like every one of us, whether it's a positive escape or a negative escape, positive escapes could be, video games. Some could say that's negative. But video games, going to the gym, anything like that, that's positive. Going on vacations, going hiking, that's a good escape. Then there's bad escapes, obviously drugs, alcohol, pornography, all these different things. Those are negative escapes, obviously. But we all have to have an escape. And my argument in this video is, what if we created a life we didn't want or need to escape from? Essentially meaning, if those positive escapes come, we don't view them as an escape, because our day-to-day life is not misery. It's not suffering. It's not always joy and blissfulness and just pure happiness 24/7, but it's not misery. It's not suffering. It's not chaos. And obviously, no matter how good life is going, things are going to happen. You're going to lose loved ones. You're going to lose a job. You're going to get broken up with or divorced. Like, the bad things are going to happen regardless of whatever life you live. No matter how rich or poor you are, like, bad things are going to happen. That's just the world that we live in. That's just the nature. That's just how nature works. So, what if you designed a life that wasn't pure chaos all the time? And I think a lot of, just like in Buddhism, they say life is suffering, and I agree with that. But they also say that we create our own suffering from our desires and our attachment to the things that we want. And typically, I think a lot of people want a lot of things that they think they want based off of other people and what society tells us we want. You know, the 2,000 square foot house, the Mercedes Benz, the $100,000 in the bank account, the cryptocurrency success, like all these different things that look successful. We assume that if we had those things, life would be much better. And typically, I see a lot of people that keep putting off their contentment and happiness and appreciation for a later date, thinking that it's going to be better. They're looking over their shoulder at a date that will never come. We have this idea in our head that when I have this and this and this, I'm going to be so happy. Life is going to be amazing. I'm going to be excited to wake up every day. And that date very rarely ever comes. And that's unfortunate. And I can say this because up until, I would say, the last 6 months, that's exactly the way I thought. I thought, once I get into my ideal career and I get a nicer car and I get my own house and stuff, then life is going to be amazing. And I'm like, why do I keep disregarding my current situation, who I am today? Why can't I just be grateful? And I'm not, and there is a balance here. I'm not saying give up on everything, but I'm also not saying sacrifice your mental well-being and your family time and the things that actually matter. Don't just give those things up and just pursue wealth and just think you're going to be happy one day when you're rich as hell, which is literally what I thought. But also don't sit around like a bump on a log and just, live off the government and thinking that everybody's going to solve your problems. Definitely not. So there is a happy medium. I think that you don't need all the things that you think you need. I think you'd be surprised on how happy you could be with very minimal things in your life. Like go on a camping trip and just go somewhere where there's no cell phone service. Take your friends, your kids, your best friends, some of your family members, and just go build a fire, go kayaking, go out in nature and realize how awesome it really is. Some people say, well, there's bugs out there's snakes, there's bears, there's spiders. Sure, of course, not everybody's going to like camping. Why don't you go just on a road trip? Go to the beach. Go do something to bring you back down to earth, to realize how special it is just to be alive, just to be cognizant of really how awesome it is just to be alive, and to get rid of or just reduce our desires, because those desires are typically not even our desires. Like, we're not born innately to want expensive cars and nice houses and all this different stuff. If you don't believe me, go ask a child, a 4-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want? They're like, I want to be a superhero. I want to do all this. I want to be a firefighter. They're not thinking about, I want 50 bands. I want a BMW and all this different stuff. Maybe some of them. Like I said, I'm making assumptions here. But for the most part, man, we're not materialistic creatures. If you study indigenous people and like prehistoric people, like hunter-gatherers. The narrative that school teaches us is that they were just savages and life was a constant struggle and the life expectancy was very low and it was just a miserable life. It's, if you really look into it and actually study it and don't just accept that information on the surface, it's not the truth. There's actually modern indigenous people that don't want to enter society because they don't have the mortgages and the debts and the car loans and all these different stresses and like social pressures to be a certain way. They have tribes that everybody shares their equal part. They all raise children together. That's why it says it takes a tribe to raise a child or whatever. And it's truth. They all raise children together. They all are, it's an egalitarian society, meaning there is no social status. Somebody's rich and poor. They're all equal. Everybody's equal. They all hunt. They all gather. They all eat. Everybody's taken care of. And they have each other's respect, and that's their currency. That's their social currency, is respect and honor and just being truthful and sharing. Like, that's what matters the most in their societies. And I think the closer we get to how we've always lived, which if you think of a historical perspective, human beings have been around for a very, very long time. And the modern way of living is just a little blip in history. So I think the further we get away from how we've always lived, the more misery, the more depression, the more anxiety, the more all these different problems that never really existed. These problems are becoming more and more prevalent. And I think it's because we're getting further and further away from how we have been for a very long time. And I've never really thought this way until the last 6 months, just opening my mind a little bit more to the truth of human suffering and our desires, stuff like that it really intrigues me and gives me a different perspective on what's a fulfilling life. Why are we even on this earth? What's important? Like these are the most important questions in existence. But so many of us are so busy trying to hit these artificial goals that were made for us based off of a hierarchical structure. Like the guy at the top is where you want to be. You start down here and you got to work your way. You got to buy all these things and you got to become this specific version of yourself to be the best. And you have to be proud of yourself. You have to make everybody around you proud. You have to be this outstanding citizen, and then everything's going to be great. But if you look at history and how we came about prior to civilization and agriculture, like, we lived a pretty chill life. The native people, the hunter-gatherers, were, for the most part, really lazy. Like, they hung around and chilled and sang and danced around campfires, and they all hunted. They would hunt with groups, so it was a lot easier. Like, don't listen to the narrative that it was constant misery and suffering. Like, that's not the truth. How did they last for that long if it was just constant disease? Like, a lot of the modern diseases and plagues and all these different things weren't even around. And they didn't have dentists. They didn't have doctors. I mean, they had some type of prehistoric remedies and stuff for things. And it was mostly placebo effect. But they didn't need dentists. Like, their diet and stuff, they didn't require. So a lot of these modern problems that we have with health are based off of agriculture and modern society. It's not things that have been prevalent throughout history. So people always like to paint this picture of how horrible pre-civilization was. And I just think you should read the book called Civilized to Death by Chris Ryan. This is where I've gained a lot of perspective from. It was an awesome book. I don't make money for telling that, but I listen to it on Audible. It's called Civilized to Death, and it's by Chris Ryan, and it's very interesting. I think the simpler we make life, the better it is. Honestly, I think the more complex we make it, where we every single hour of every day is scheduled, and we're so strict, and we have to show up at our jobs that we hate. We come back home to a house we don't really need or like. We have cars that are way too expensive. We have all these different things that we think we need. And I think we end up overlooking the very, very important details of life. And we end up later in life, in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, if we're lucky, if we make it that long, and we look back and say, why did I work so much? Why was I so focused on these things that I thought were going to make me happy that weren't going to make me happy? Why did I let society convince me that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't already good enough? Like, I don't know. It's a hard concept to wrap your mind around because, physical appearance, we're always tested in school, and it tells us how, like, it puts us in categories of how smart or dumb we are, or how fat and skinny we are, ugly, pretty. Like, all these different categories never existed throughout history. So of course anxiety, depression, and all these different diabolical things are happening based off of putting everybody in categories. There used to not be categories. We were all equal. Everything was equal. And by the way, life expectancy based off of the book Civilized to Death by Chris Ryan, the mortality rate was low. So like if you Google like ancient hunter-gatherer mortality rate, it looks very low, and that's because the truth is the worst part about pre-civilization was birth, like giving birth. There was a high chance, I think it was like 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 like births were fatal for the mother or the child. So that skews the mortality rate. So it looks like they only lived for 30 to 40 years if they were lucky, but that's not the truth. If you look at the whole picture, if you were born and you were lucky enough to make it past infancy and past the baby stage, you would live a very healthy life. Like, life expectancy hasn't changed as much as we think. Like, nowadays people think we're the healthiest we've ever been, we live the longest. It's not the truth. The numbers are skewed. They're telling you things they want you to hear, and that goes back to question everything that you hear. Don't always accept everything as the truth. Look into it for yourself. And so that's why I say that. So they paint this picture of how horrible and miserable life used to be, and we didn't live long at all, and it was just pitiful, and it was just constant suffering. I would argue and say that like modern life is suffering. Modern life has created like suicide rates out of the roof, and depression, anxiety, all these different things that never existed in the past. So I know I've went on and on and on, but one day I'm not going to be here. One day I'm going to die, and this is all that you'll have to remember me, which doesn't matter anyway, because who cares, honestly? Like, even if people remember me for 10 or 5 years after I die, eventually it just fades away and everybody just goes on and moves on with their life, and I ain't mad at you, because that's just how it is. I've had people in my life that die, and I still think about them all the time, but life goes on, and we are all just chasing something. Who knows what we're chasing? But anyways, I hope you enjoy this. Hopefully some of this resonates with you, makes sense. Maybe you question some things that you do, and that's the whole point. Just give you a different perspective, because I know how different perspectives have shaped me and questioned my life, and I love changing my mind. I love thinking about different ways of living, because I don't think there is one way to live, and I don't think there's one way to think. So anyway, peace out. Thank you for watching.